Hi, fifth graders. You should have already answered your do now. If you have not already, please pause this video and then press play when you're finished. All right, the question for number 1 on your do now is popping up on your screen. Please put what you placed on your paper. And let's review. This question says, which heading best completes the partial outline below? And so I see that there's a title line here and they want us to pick the title. And what's below the title is House of Burgesses, the Mayflower Compact, and New England Town Meetings. Now, we learned a lot about these two things yesterday, and so before I even look at the answer choices, I'm going to be thinking about what I already know about the House of Burgesses, the Mayflower Compact, and what I think I know about the New England Town Meetings. So I know that those were colonial governments. I know that they were both democracies, and that they were run by the colonists. Remember, it was a big deal that people on the Mayflower Compact all agreed to be governed by the Mayflower Compact. So now we want to think which heading would best complete this outline. And we already have some ideas here. So if we see any answers that look a lot like these, then we'll know to pick it. A says the British system of national government in North America. So that says national government right there. That means that there is one government ruling over all the colonies. And we know that there were lots of different governments, like the Mayflower Compact and the House of Burgesses and the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. And so there was no one national government. We can cross off A. Number 2 says colonial responses to the practice of salutary neglect. Now, they're trying to trick you here because you did learn about salutary neglect this year. But what does that have to do with the House of Burgesses or the Mayflower Compact? It doesn't have anything to do with it, so you can cross it off. They're just trying to give you a familiar word to trick you. C says the British attempts to control colonial governments. And so what we're noticing here is it says control colonial governments. Yesterday we learned all about the democracies and the way that the colonies were self-governed. And so it doesn't make sense that the British were trying to control the governments. The British kind of left the American governments to do what they pleased. So that is wrong, especially when we know that the Mayflower Compact was a self-rule. And D says colonial efforts at self-government. That we know is the correct answer. We know it because all of these options are wrong. And we actually said that when we thought about what we know about these 3 different parts of colonial government. All right, number 2. Your question is popping up on the screen. Click what you put on your paper. Number 2 says, use the text in your knowledge of social studies to answer the question. This was adapted from the Mayflower Compact. So we're already thinking about what we know about the Mayflower Compact. We know it was a democracy that was run by the colonists. It was self-governed. We whose names are underwritten do solemnly and mutually combine ourselves together in a civil group of persons organized under a single authority. For our better ordering and preservation, we enact and frame just and equal laws for the general good of the colony. To the colony we promise all due submission and obedience. Which statement best explains how the Mayflower Compact influenced the development of American democracy? So we're trying to think, how does the Mayflower Compact influence democracy? So we're asking ourselves, how did this influence the government that we have today? And we're going to use the text to help us find the right answer. So let's look at A first. It says, it identified the importance of citizens agreeing to be governed. So let's look back into the text and see if the text says anything about citizens agreeing to govern. So that first sentence says, we solemnly and mutually combine ourselves together in a civil groups of persons organized under a single authority. So that's kind of a mouthful, but let's take it apart. So they're saying that we all agree to combine ourselves together under an authority. And there they're talking about a government. We agree to all be under the same government. So that one checks out. I see evidence in this text that supports that A might be right. But we know we cannot just circle the first thing that looks right. There might be a better answer. So I'm going to put a star next to A, and I'm going to come back to it after I've read all the answer choices. B says it created the separation between church and government. Now, I don't see anything about church or government in this reading. And then when I apply what I know about the Mayflower Compact and the Plymouth Colony, I know that many of those colonists were Puritans, and the Puritans were very religious, and they did not separate their church and their government. So this is wrong. I know it's wrong because it's not in the text, and it also goes against what I know about that colonial group. C says it established individual rights and freedoms. So I'm looking back in the text, and I don't see where it talks about rights. I don't see anything where they're promising freedoms either. Now, that does sound familiar, though. We did talk about establishing individual rights and freedoms, but that was in the document known as the English Bill of Rights. The Mayflower Compact did not list out the rights. Instead, the Mayflower Compact promised to govern. It created a democracy in the Plymouth colony. So we're going to cross that off because C is talking about the English Bill of Rights. And D says it encouraged the development of political parties. So that one's just kind of random. Like I would draw a question mark by that one. Where did we talk about political parties when we talked about the Mayflower Compact? And when I look back on the text, I'm not seeing anything about political parties. So I'm going to cross that one off. It's pretty clear that there's only one correct answer. I know it's right because it's true. We talked earlier about how the Mayflower Compact allowed citizens to be self-governed, and I found the answer in the text. Always use the text. It has really great clues for you to make sure that you're getting the right answers. All right, and we're going to review the paragraph. Check your answers on the paragraph, pause it if you need to. Who we are today is shaped by our past. Our government, for example, is influenced by the way our early colonies ran. One of the earliest colonial government documents, the Mayflower Compact, was signed by the Plymouth colonists before they arrived in America. In this document, the colonists all agreed to be governed, or controlled by a government. This showed it was important for citizens to agree to the leadership of their government. And pay attention, that's talking about what we just learned about with that Mayflower Compact. If that was hard for you, this little paragraph might be helpful. Most colonial governments created a representative government. In this type of government, people chose others to make decisions for them in government. The Virginia House of Burgesses, another example of colonial government that elected, is another example of colonial governments that elected representatives called legislators. If they did a bad job, they could be voted out of office. Some governments, like the one set up by William Penn in the middle colonies, ensured there would be religious freedom. Other colonies, like the New England colonies, required everyone to practice the Puritan religion. Our government today is heavily influenced by the colonial governments that came before it. Okay, today's aim is to be able to practice eliminating incorrect answer choices to help find the best answer, just like we did with our Do Now review, and to describe colonial American governments and their influences. So you're going to be toggling back and forth between this Edpuzzle and Illuminate. Step 1 is to log into Illuminate. Click on 5th Unit 3 B-Day Part 2 Item Set. Make sure it says Item Set and not Exit Ticket, and then click Begin Test, but do not start testing yet. Okay, once you're on Unit 3 B-Day Part 2 Item Set, let's start following the steps to answering an item set. So step 1 is to read the directions and write down the topic of the item set. So just a reminder, the LEAP test is always going to give you a clue about what the item set's about. And when you use that clue to remind yourself of everything you know about that topic, it's going to help you get more questions correct. So look on to Illuminate, and right here are your directions. There's a clue in these directions about what this item set is about. After you've done that, write it right here on your paper. Okay, you should have written that this item set is about colonial governments. Colonial means colony, so the governments in the American colonies. Now we're going to do step 2, jot down some things that you already know about this topic. So on your paper, right here, write down what you already know about colonial governments in America. There were plenty of different things that you could have written here. I'm going to tell you a couple of the things that I put. I put that colonial means colony, so colony governments. I put that the American colonies had democracies. And we know that in a democracy, you vote to elect legislators or other representatives to represent you in government. And that they ruled themselves. They had self-governance. And finally, I put just the name of a couple of colonial governments I know about: the Mayflower Compact, the House of Burgesses. You could have put the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, the Charter of Delaware. There were many different options that you could have put here. All right, and now we are getting ready to end our Ed puzzle because you are going to close out and do steps 3, 4, 5, and 6 on your own. So that means read the questions first and answer the ones you can without the reading. So ignore the readings at first. Then you go back and read the passages, and then go back and check your answers to the questions you've already answered and answer the ones that you've left blank. That means eliminate the wrong choices first, select the correct answer last, and then double check against the passages. Finally, check the next button to answer all questions in this set. Remember, the passages oftentimes have all the answers, so make sure you're using that resource. As you are working, focus on eliminating incorrect choices. You're going to eliminate the incorrect choices first. If you change your mind about an eliminated option, just click on that option again, and then select the correct answer by clicking the bubble next to the correct answer. The elimination tool in Illuminate is right here above each question. You're also going to write your answers on this paper. It's really important that you write your answers on the paper as well, because that helps Ms. Canepa and Ms. Bardis walk around and see who's getting what correct and give you help if you need it. All right, you guys are smart, you're capable, and you can always grow. You're going to have about 15 minutes to answer this item set. When you're finished listening to this, press stop and begin your item set.